and we've got a great partner in the industry. He is the owner of Entrée Canada and Alaska, and his name is Marc Telio. He's a good friend of ours in the industry because of his expertise, because of his experience. He's coming to us live from the destination. He's in Canada right now. He's in Vancouver. So no better person to talk about the destination than someone who lives it. And he'll talk about a lot of personal experiences that he's had in this destination with you on the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the owner of Entrée Canada and Alaska, Marc Telio. Marc, take it away.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking an hour or some time of your day to spend with us and to learn about what we're doing up in Alaska and Canada. Well, I'll start by giving you just a brief introduction. As Ryan mentioned, I'm a very dear partner of Bon Voyage Travel, and actually the two of us are partners with Signature Travel Network, which is kind of this fabulous luxury network of advisors and vendors. And they've brought us together, and yeah, you know, frankly, without getting too into it, essentially it makes you a VIP the minute that you reach out to Bon Voyage and they call us. We've been partners with Signature Travel Network since they started working with travel companies like mine. Destination specialists we're called, and again, that gives you access to the best hotel rates, to preferred amenities in hotels, and most of all, you know, quite frankly, just the quality service of a luxury travel advisor and their partner on the ground. And together we create, as it says on your screen, transformational experiences across both Canada and Alaska. I'm from Montreal originally. I opened up this business 26 years ago. Well, we're living in quite the times we are now that we find ourselves on Zoom calls instead of meeting in person. Anyhow, I hope all of you are safe, and yeah, let's buckle up, fasten your seatbelt, and let's get into this. Now, I will start by telling you that, hold on here, we, for the last 2 years, have essentially been purchasing 30% more than we need to with the endeavor of offsetting all of our operations with gold standard renewable energy certificates. And so that goes for the company, the office that I'm in, my car, every time I get on a plane, every time any of my staff members get on a plane, and more importantly, every time that a guest travels with us, a portion of their trip goes toward offsetting their trip, which is part of our approach towards sustainability, amongst other things that we do. And again, it means that you can travel knowing that we're actually putting about 30% more of the carbon offset, or rather of the carbon emissions, back into the environment with high quality renewable certificates. So it's the least that we can do. And again, it's just one of the things that we do. The word sustainable is a big word, and if anyone has any questions about other things that we do towards sustainability, I'm happy to talk about that. So we're going to start with Alaska, you know, and ultimately, while Bon Voyage, one of their specialties is definitely selling cruises. Actually, we don't sell cruises, but we sell everything else pretty much in Alaska. Alaska's got 5 distinct regions. We've got the far north, the interior, the southwest, south central, and the southeast, which is also known as the Inside Passage, and that's where primarily cruises go. Now, we only operate in the lower 4 of those 5 regions, and more specifically, most of our operations are in the southwest, south central, and the Inside Passage. Now, you know, for us, the most magical way to really experience Alaska, you know, frankly, the way that we feel it's best experienced is on land using a collection of beautiful wilderness lodges. And we're blessed with a beautiful collection of lodges all over the state, as I mentioned, in those various distinct regions earlier. And, you know, these are hosted and owned by local Alaskans that are just so passionate about hosting our guests. Each one of them has their own characteristics, attributes, You know, the first one that you saw is one of my favorites for fishing. And you know, I took my daughter there. One day we caught 6 different species of fish on one trip. One of the fish that she caught was a 45-pound king salmon. At the time, she was about 60 pounds, so it was quite a picture. And again, different lodges. This one, for example, is a really good all-around adventure lodge where we kayak among icebergs. We go looking for whales. We go fishing. We go looking for birds, even a cooking school. This one specializes in flying. Later on in the presentation, you'll see the kind of aircraft that I'm talking about. Now, it's all about exploring Wrangell St. Elias Park, which is just an enormous park that is filled with wildlife and activities. And again, we fly around from activity to activity during the day. And part of that is landing on glaciers with these beautiful airplanes, landing on the top of the mountain. And again, you know, you'll see the kind of airplane that I'm talking about shortly, but this one's all about flying. This one, helicopter fishing and all around adventure. It's also, I consider this to be one of the nicest lodges in the state, technically from a luxurious perspective. This one, a little bit more of an all-arounder, which is a little more rustic, a little bit less expensive, and again, has a collection of activities from dog sledding to helicopter fishing to yoga, cooking classes, hikes, brown bear viewing, all kinds of activities. You know, this one is actually positioned on Denali, and it's only got 5 bedrooms. And this one is in Kodiak Island. And if you see the manicured lawn right there, right in front of the cabins, this is what's going on the front lawn. The Kodiak bear, which is this beautiful bear, is roaming freely around the area. And with Indigenous guides, because Kodiak Brown Bear Center is owned by an Indigenous tourism company, we visit in their traditional territory looking for this beautiful Kodiak bear. We've got some lodges that'll get us to this iconic spot on Brooks Falls, where again, you can stand in that legendary spot and get that classic picture of the bear catching the salmon, or other properties where literally all they do is go tracking for bears all day. And so again, I mean, bears are on almost everyone's list that goes to Alaska. We've got them in spades. And again, it's all really about what you're looking for, and it comes down to what your preferences are, how long you want to be spending time with the wildlife, budget, all of that factors in, seasonality, where the bears are at what time of the year. All of that goes into our expertise in planning a trip. And then once we've decided on which lodges, because we've achieved, you know, we've come together to decide on which properties, then we'll marry the right logistics to it. In most cases, you're flying from one to the other. Even getting to these beautiful walruses, we could land our guests literally on the next beach next to 1,000 walruses during mating season to get up close and personal. Now, it's worth mentioning, because we've talked about flying quite a lot, 95% of Alaska is the wilderness, and only 5% has the road system on it. And so we do work with a number of properties and lodges that are on the road system. But what that means is that essentially you're sharing it with a lot of the other buses and vehicles that are ferrying, in a typical year, cruise ship guests around. And the minute that you get onto a small aircraft and go into the wilderness, you are ultimately avoiding that. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's just to say that 95% of the state is wild. And really that's where we feel, you know, Alaska calls our guests, and where we can really make magic happen in remote, intimate settings. Sky trekking. So we talked earlier about flying. This is the kind of aircraft that we use at that property I showed you. It's called Ultimatuli Lodge. And that's where we fly around the Wrangell St. Elias Park. But we actually use these aircraft as a way of transportation, not only just excursions. So if you're interested in this kind of travel, again, this is how you actually get to most of our lodges, if not using a helicopter. But we could also create out of the blue, a customized trip where you're flying around from one location and another, just you and your pilot and your party. We can have you in old cabins, even old abandoned mining camps, or flying it at one point to one of the more luxurious lodges, and all of it could be custom. In fact, note that every single trip we do is customized, and that's where Bon Voyage comes into the picture. Is, you know, your travel advisor knows you, they know you know what you like, and they can work with you on everything from your budget to your wish list, and then that's where we come into the picture to sort of build that trip. This picture I took, my director of sales is actually in that plane with the yellow wings, and I was hanging above in another aircraft with just seat belts holding me in. But you know, quite frankly, this is, on any given day, we'll have 10 or 12 aircraft in the air flying our guests around and enjoying the state of Alaska. So these aren't just brochure pictures. This is totally what we do. I'm an avid fisherman, as are a number of my staff members. So again, if you like to fish, you'll know how technical it is. And again, that's a tremendous value that we bring to the picture. Is essentially, we can do fishing from a lake, we can do fishing in rivers, in streams, deep sea fishing in the ocean, helicopter fishing. We can target freshwater species, salmon, or again, those low swimming fish like the halibut. So all you need to do, and you don't have to be experienced to do it, we've got fishing lodges that have got spectacular guides that can guide the most experienced anglers or beginners. It doesn't really matter when you're standing on a river in waders catching beautiful king salmon like this. You know, it's beautiful. And again, this could be part of a 3-day trip, a 4-day fishing trip, or it could be just part of a multi-adventure trip where you're seeing bears on one day and fishing on another day and mixing it up. Because everything we do is customized. Don't be shy to bring your imagination and really your true wish list, because odds are we'll be able to figure it out. We do quite a lot of Northern Lights viewing in Alaska. Now this is in the interior, where it's just out of the Fairbanks region. This is really a 4-night stay, not much more than that. At night, you're looking at the lights, and we get really beautiful sights like this. During the day, you're snowmobiling, you're doing cultural programs. You could go ice fishing, dog sledding. There's a nice arrangement of activities that we do, of winter programs. Now you can technically see the lights in Alaska from August until April, but really prime time is roughly from the middle of January until March. Now, soft adventure is definitely a big part of what Alaska is all about. And again, you know, with tremendous amount of work that we do to vet suppliers to make sure that we're following the strictest safety standards and protocols. But, you know, this is what Alaska is all about. We land that Robinson 44 helicopter on that glacier literally 7 days a week. And of course, only with our guests on it. And we'll set up a picnic lunch there, and guests will go out hiking from there. And quite frankly, everyone feels like they're the first people that have ever stepped onto that glacier. And when you're out there, you really are alone. And really that is what people come home talking about. You know, we can strap on 6 mountain bikes to this helicopter and land on glaciers, or land on ice fields, or land on mountain types if you have a little bit more adrenaline coursing through your veins. But again, you know, with a helicopter, we can land on any kind of terrain and pretty much do anything. Our partners are used to it, and you know, that's what we do. We work with the rail system throughout Alaska, the Alaska train system, and all of the destinations that it services. So that could be part of a component. And when you are cruising, needless to say that private shore excursions is a big part of our business. You're looking at helicopter dog sledding, which is one of our most popular excursions. And, you know, if you haven't done private shore excursions, I will tell you that should your budget permit, it is absolutely something that you should do at least once during a cruise in Alaska. You know, the Alaskan ports can get really, really busy with multiple cruise ships in port. And quite honestly, the suppliers that service the cruise ship, the only option is to do things in groups. And rarely do you actually get privacy. And the way that we do helicopter dog sledding is we've got our own helicopter pilot landing on a glacier that we have reserved for ourselves with our own musher and his team of dogs. So rather than getting just a few minutes with a dog and you get to see a dog sled, our guests actually learn how to dog sled and spend hours on that glacier privately with the pilot and the mushers. So this is in fact where my daughter celebrated her 10th birthday, on a glacier with a team of dogs, and it was magical and memorable. We'll do things like this, getting you into private ice caves for safe hikes, but to get into beautiful regions like this. This is taken outside of Juneau. Pre and post cruise, all of those lodges that we spoke about make a spectacular pre and post cruise option as well. So if you're cruising and doing a trip on board a major cruise ship, you know, consider taking 2 or 3 days to go to one of those lodges, to get out into the remote wilderness, to view bears, walruses, to do that fishing trip that you saw. But again, I could tell you that 9 times out of 10, our guests come home and talk about the fact that that was a huge highlight for them. And lastly, so many of our American guests just have you know, an affinity for Denali. It's on their list. We know why, and we do all things Denali. When you go to Denali, you can stay at the entrance and visit the park. We've got guides that tour in the park. We often do a drive into the middle of the park, where you can stay at the entrance, or you can actually stay at one of 3 lodges that were grandfathered into the park, inside the park. Wildlife viewing, touring, and, you know, aerial sightseeing. So again, most of our guests might drive in one way. It's a 6-hour drive, so it's scenic, but it could be long, and then we'll fly them out, or the reverse. But all things Denali, often it's on the bucket list of many of our guests. And lastly, this is what it's about. Really, for us, is connecting our guests to locals and to the land. It's a critical thing of what we do. And it's really what people come home talking about. The adventures are beautiful, the land is spectacular, but you know, people are often touched by the Alaskan locals that they encounter. If you're living in Alaska, it means you love Alaska and you're there for a good reason, and people come home raving about it. It's an important part of the trip, is visiting with locals. So yeah, that's just in a nutshell the kinds of activities and experiences that we do in Alaska. We're now going to move into Canada. So this is a huge country, as you know, and wherever you see white is where we operate. But, you know, we don't operate in absolutely every village and city and town, on every lake and mountain. Rather, over the last 26 years, we've carved out a collection of experiences that, you know, we feel are spectacular and meet the needs of our guests. You know, but frankly, we don't do everything, like I said. So, you know, just in the spirit of setting expectations, that said, we probably meet the needs of 96% of what our guests are looking for. It's just that rare case where if you're looking for something that we're unfamiliar with, we'll tell your travel advisor and still help them find a way to get there. It just might not be us. But again, you'll see what we do here. And I'm going to start on the most eastern point you can get, on the shores of Fogo Island in Newfoundland. Newfoundland is a magical place, and I'm going to tell you what is typically a 2-hour story in about 4 minutes. Wish me luck, but it's really one of my favorite places, and it's worth the time to hear it. Now, this is a sample itinerary that we have, but it just gives you a lay of the land. So to access this inn, you'd fly into either St. John's, Newfoundland, or Halifax, and then you fly up to Gander. And then from there, you either get on a small plane or helicopter and fly further to Fogo Island, or you can take an SUV and a ferry. And it starts here 400 years ago. So Fogo Island has been a fisherman's paradise for commercial fishermen for the last 400 years. What happened was merchant fishermen from other countries found the codfish off the coast of Newfoundland. And the cod, they discovered, has the most amount of protein in it than anything else on earth, any other creature in the sea. And so our government allowed these foreign governments to come in and fish to their heart's content. Now, it was a robust industry for decades, even centuries. But, and in fact, almost the entire economy along the shores of Newfoundland naturally revolved around the cod fishing industry. You either were a boat builder that serviced the cod industry, or you made the pitchforks these guys are holding for the cod industry, or you were in the cod liver oil industry. Either way, most people and their finances revolved around the cod industry. The problem was that our government allowed these countries to come in and fish to their heart's content without any idea of what sustainable fishing practice was 400 years ago. So they fished the cod out almost to the point of extinction. Now, what do you think happened to the economy that was so reliant on the codfish? The economy died too. And by around the 60s and the 50s, basically people all along the eastern seaboard were born into poverty and illiteracy because their industry had died. Fogo Island at its peak had 5,000 people living on the island, and by 1955, only 2,600 people left. Enter this woman, a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Zita Cobb. She was born on the island, again, in poverty, quite frankly, in a 700 square foot shed. A brilliant woman, a visionary, and she decided to make it her life's work to figure out how in the world our government allowed people to come in and fish that way, how they allowed our economy to collapse that way along the eastern seaboard, and to fix it. So she puts herself through university, moves into the tech industry, becomes the chief financial officer of JDS Uniphase, which in the 80s and 90s led the fiber optics industry, and she walked away with about $100 million. And as she once said to me, she's got quite a unique and odd connection to money. She doesn't feel that it's hers to keep. So she decided to move back to the island and use her money, or some of it, to boost the economy. So she decided to build this inn. Now you'll notice that it sits on stilts, and there's a reason. I'll show that to you in a minute. Even the shape is shaped like a shed or a boat. Now, it looks like this today. But this inn is not only a tool to boost their economy, it's also a vehicle, or let's say a vessel, that they use to honor their past and their heritage. And that's what I find, quite beautiful about this. As well, you'll notice that it's contemporary in design. So it's in part about honoring their past, but it's also about moving them forward and not living in the past. And inside the inn, again, it's a nod to their past. Every curtain, every pillow sham, the knitted chaise longue pillow that you see, the furniture, it's all made on the island. And all of it honoring their tradition and their culture and their old patterns and their heritage. So again, it's a showpiece. They also built 4 different artist studios, same architect, Todd Saunders, again, contemporary. But each of these artist studios are in absolutely a magical place. This one is called The Squish. It's one of my favorites. In fact, it's one of my favorite places to stand in all of Canada. It's where 2 bodies of water converge. In the winter, you can see pack ice flying up 50 feet up into the air. And in the summer, it's just a beautiful, dramatic spot. This is the Long Studio. So again, they're all quite different. And in each of the 4, there's an artist in residence, and the inn pays, because they're patrons of the arts, they pay an artist a small stipend to come in and produce artwork. And if it's good enough, it gets into the gallery in the inn. There's a shed, and you'll see it's on stilts. Why? Because the boat that you see in the foreground of this picture is called a punt. That's how they used to fish cod. They would go out and pull the boat into the bottom of the shed, which is on stilts. The hatch in the floor would open up, and that's where you would sort of take a pitchfork and shove the cod through the floors, and that's where they would process the cod. And that is really how they fished for cod, but that also explains why the inn is also on stilts. And all of the activities around Fogo Island Inn revolve around their culture and their natural attributes. So they've got one of the largest concentration of humpback whales on earth, excuse me, parked right in front of their door. They do hikes all along the seashore. This is just a classic shot, and you can see one of the 10 communities on the island in the background. traditional punt boat racing, traditional cod fishing, the way that they used to do it. And, you know, again, it's just all about touring the island and seeing what it's all about. Now, the end of this story is quite beautiful. When the inn was built, $50 million later, with truly the desire to rebuild the economics of her community, Zita created the Shorefast Foundation, which Shorefast is what they used to tether fishing lines to the shore with. And she gave the inn to the foundation, and she made, excuse me, a bird just hit my window up here in the penthouse. Wow. And she made the inn, rather all of the islanders, equal shareholders in the inn. So today, $50 million investment, and all 2,600 of the locals on the island own a share of the inn. She's just one of the 2,600 people. And to make her point, she created what looks like a food label, but it's an economic nutrition label. And it shows you where the money goes. And the surplus, as you can see, their profit is reinvested directly back into the community. So truly, it's put Fogo Island on the map. She set out what she meant to do. It is one of the most beautiful stories of social enterprise I've ever seen. And quite frankly, it's one of the most authentic things that we offer, and just one of my favorites, as you could tell. Okay, we're gonna move on to Quebec. So as you know, I'm from Montreal, and you know, I'm passionate about welcoming guests to Montreal, Quebec City, and the province of Quebec. It's just a slice of Europe, including old world architecture, charm, and culture. This is one of the sample itineraries that we have, which visits Montreal, Mont-Tremblant, Sac-à-Commis, and Quebec City. And again, as I mentioned, I'm going to say it again, we could customize this if you want to do it shorter. We could customize this if you want to drive it yourself, or if you want to be driven. We start off in Montreal, and again, this could be done in the winter or in the summer. I'm very comfortable with winters in Quebec, and I think there's something quite beautiful about it. It's still a beautiful place to visit, even when it's covered in snow. Montreal's got a great food scene, so we do an amazing job of foodie tours, cultural tours, tours that are focused on different cultures. Like Montreal is known as a cultural mosaic. So next to the neighborhood, which is populated by Orthodox Jews, you might have the Portuguese neighborhood, or the Greek neighborhood, which is next to Little Italy. And sort of unlike a melting pot idea, what we call this is a cultural mosaic, where the cultures have remained intact. And that's kind of what we celebrate when we visit Montreal, and that's really what Montreal is all about, actually. This is what Mont-Tremblant looks like in the winter. It's actually a great ski resort. I think it's the best skiing on the east coast of North America. But in the summer, as you can see, it's a beautiful alpine village filled with outdoor activities in the wilderness. This is what Sac-à-Commis looks like. So this is a more sort of rustic Quebec style lodge, but you can see the geography. It sits on a beautiful lake. Activities here might include bear viewing, hiking, fishing, wildlife viewing in general. You know, and again, even though you're visiting Montreal, what I like about this is the idea of actually getting some time in the wilderness as well. And then we get to Quebec. Now, in the winter or summer, as I mentioned, but in the winter, Quebec's got the Ice Hotel, which is a super cool place to wake up in the morning and check your pulse to know that you made it through the night in your bedroom. Another thing that I like about this hotel is that every suite is individually carved out by a different designer, and they're all different. So during the day, you can actually tour and visit every suite. It's actually an attraction. And at night, when 7 o'clock or 6:30 is when they let you into your room and it's yours for the night. It's great for families because there's actually miles of inner tube races that you can do like this, but also ice fishing, dog sledding, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, excuse me. So that's Quebec, and again, just in a high-level nutshell, I could talk about Quebec for hours. We're gonna move into central Canada. This is Manitoba. This is way above the tree line, subarctic, and this is a lodge where we get to go polar bear viewing. Now, one of my greatest passions is bears in general, and we do polar bear viewing like nobody else. We do it on foot, and we do it throughout the summer as well as the winter. So it's all about the polar bear's environment and life cycle. So we do polar bear viewing in July and August, and you can see the bears surrounded by this gorgeous purple fireweed. And then come September, October, and November, into the first couple of weeks of November, you get this, it just becomes white. And this shows you the kind of proximity that we get. You don't have to be tremendously fit to do this. In fact, the bears congregate quite close to the lodge. On any given day, you might be walking a mile, but slowly and on spongy, flat land. As you can see, it's not mountainous. It's quite an easy walk, and you get this kind of proximity in photography. So it's one of my favorite things to do. Moving into the west further, we get to the Rocky Mountains. So this is, again, a beautiful area. This is in the province of Alberta. This is as iconic as it gets. Here's a classic itinerary, which starts in Calgary, where you've got the Calgary Stampede in July. And then it includes Banff, Jasper, and Lake Louise. And again, this is probably the easiest place on earth to rent a car and drive yourself. And you can rent your own car, or equally, you can be chauffeured the entire time, or a combination, which is my personal preference. It saves quite a lot of money. It gives you the flexibility of having your own wheels. But on any given day, to see Banff or Jasper or Lake Louise, we might have a private guide and driver take you around and give you some interpretation or hikes or rafting. It's part of the experience. We work closely with the iconic Fairmont hotels, as does Bon Voyage Travel. This is the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise. We also have the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, as well as the Fairmont Banff Springs. Great partners of both Bon Voyage and I. And again, you have special amenities and benefits at all of these properties. And really, of course, it's all about being in the outdoors, not in the hotel. But you know, on any given day, we can have you in this kind of arid territory, you know, visiting on horseback for a part of it. And then in the afternoon, you can be on a turquoise lake canoeing or kayaking or boating, you know, and again, that's where the customization comes in. But it's all about getting you into places like this. This is literally a 10-minute walk off of the highway on the way up to Jasper. And that's not Photoshopped. That's what it looks like. It's that beautiful. So we really get our guests into the heart of the Rockies, which is the name of that itinerary. And we do it, you know, as one of our great specialties. Now, this is called the Rocky Mountaineer. Again, partners, you know, very dear partners with us. And this is a great way, if you want to include British Columbia, or at least if you're a train buff, this connects all of those destinations. You can go from Jasper, Banff, Lake Louise, or Calgary to Vancouver on this train, or eastbound. It goes reverse, of course. You can go from Vancouver and plan a trip where you're visiting the west coast of British Columbia, and then continue on into the Rockies. But this is a great way to do it. It's not necessarily for everyone. So once you're on the phone with your Bon Voyage consultant, we can talk about, is it the right fit for you? I say that because as much as I love it, you know, this might affect the budget. It's a 2-day, 1-night trip. It has you staying in a moderate hotel in the middle. And quite frankly, depending on the service that you take, it could get up to $2,000 in price. So, you know, whereas it could be a simple 45-minute flight from Calgary to Vancouver for a few $100s on a regional airline. So I say that because it might factor into whether or not it's the right fit and it has a place in your trip. And of course, it gets to Vancouver. Now, I moved here from Montreal 26 years ago to open up this company. It is such a beautiful place to visit. In fact, this is the view that I get to have from my desk right now. And this is really a beautiful place on its own to visit, but also, if you look at the map, it's really an amazing gateway to the entire coast of British Columbia. And, you know, to the west of Vancouver, you've got Vancouver Island, which is blessed with a lot of beautiful wilderness lodges. but all the way from basically northern Washington, all the way up to the coast of Alaska. You've got what's called the Great Bear Rainforest, and this is how we get there. So again, kind of like Alaska, while you could drive and there's more options for transportation, almost everything we do involves a small plane. It's a scenic, quite frankly, in my opinion, very safe flight, which gets you out into the beautiful remote wilderness. Again, you can drive it, you can cruise, there's different ways to go. It doesn't only have to mean a small plane, but it really gets you out to this rainforest within an hour. And in fact, this is what it looks like 10 minutes from my house. You've got the dramatic Pacific Ocean, followed by dense, lush rainforest. This picture I took while I was on a bear viewing trip with my family, and this is what the rainforest looks like. It's called Temperate Boreal Rainforest. It's very special because only 2% of the earth is covered in this rainforest, and basically it's here and in Patagonia. And one of the things that makes it special is if you look closely at these interesting bulbs on the trees, you see that it's got moss, and that moss takes about 100 years to grow 1 inch. That's why they call it old growth rainforest. That's why I'm in the business of conserving it. It's rich, it's just life. And so much of it, you know, underwater, it's as pristine as over water. You've got some of the most beautiful clear water diving. You've got, it's abundant with sea life in the rainforest, and you get to see beautiful guys like this that'll come right up close to our guests. And they're quite curious. They're almost like dogs, but underwater. And I'm not kidding. If you actually watch one or watch a colony of them, you'll see how they behave. Now, just excuse the noise in the background, but I'm just going to turn my computer around. You'll see just a classic scene in the harbor, but that's a helicopter taking off. And, you know, that's really what it looks like. And really, they're all going out into the rainforest as well. We've got beautiful whale watching experiences. We've got killer whales, humpback whales, gray whales, minke whales, all different species. Up in the area, you've got eagles and all kinds of bird life. And of course, on the ground, you've got the mighty grizzly bear. And as you know, I'm just passionate about putting our guests in front of these bears. We've got experiences where we can have you in a rustic cabin for 4 days at a time, up close and personal, tracking grizzly bears or the spirit bear. Now, this is a unique animal that only lives in the Great Bear Rainforest. It's indigenous to the area, excuse me. And essentially, it's a white black bear. That's his sibling. And it's an albino black bear. And to the indigenous people of Canada and British Columbia, that's a sacred animal because they're so elusive and special. So when they grow up, this is what they look like. And again, it is a spiritual experience when you see one walking down the riverbank. In fact, I was with my family on one bear viewing trip, and we were waiting for this guy to come down the river when this black bear jumped out of the woods, out of the bushes, literally 6 feet from my son, landed on this rock, and we got to watch him for about 2 hours just fishing for salmon in this river while we were waiting for the spirit bear. So again, you know, these are things that we do every day. It's just all about appreciating the rainforest, the wildlife, nature, and, you know, quite frankly, with what's been going on and people, you know, being encouraged to stay in their houses, you know, me included, I can't tell you how excited I am about getting out into the wilderness and seeing this. And of course, all of this revolves around a healthy life cycle of the Pacific salmon. It feeds the earth, it feeds the bears, it feeds the eagles. Everything in the ecosystem revolves around a healthy Pacific salmon run. And again, that's why we're involved in conservation efforts to make sure that the run remains healthy. And in the last couple of years, with global warming, it's behaved a little bit differently, which again, goes into the planning of a trip and what is the right season and when is the best chance to see the wildlife. Now, like Alaska, we use these wonderful lodges, all of them different sizes and shapes, as the platform to go and experience the rainforest. You know, this last property I showed you has got 79 guest rooms. This one's only got 9 cabins. It's perfect for a buyout, for a large multi-generational family, but it's just got that intimacy. And again, amazing wildlife viewing. This one is more rustic. We're not afraid of rustic because all they do here is track the spirit bear and grizzly bear. Here, they just track bears and whales. So again, all of our experience and expertise goes into the planning and the selection. You know, this is a tent camp. It's one of my favorites. My kids have been here about 15 times, and 2 summers ago, my daughter was a chef here. And it's a great all-around adventure property: horseback riding, whale watching, salmon fishing, sea kayaking, even paintball, rock climbing, tons of activities to do here. And lastly, to cruise the rainforest, I've got this gorgeous private yacht that's owned and captained by a very dear friend of mine. And I can think of no better way than experiencing the coast, because Colin, the captain, can get you up close and personal. You know, we've had a family of 5 within 5 minutes 2 years ago of landing. We landed a seaplane right next to this yacht. 23 killer whales popped up and surrounded the yacht, and we lowered 5 kayaks into the water, and within 10 minutes of arriving and starting their holiday, I had this family of 5 sea kayaking with 23 killer whales all afternoon. So again, you know, this isn't just brochure talk, frankly. I'm recounting stories that our guests get to experience every day. Last year, Colin had a humpback whale literally rubbing his fin against the hull of the boat while guests were 1 foot away watching it. So it's all about getting out there, and this is what my family looks like when we're all gussied up and cruising, looking for whales and bears in the rainforest. And, you know, we get to do activities like this where, you know, we can land on a beach and go helicopter fishing, or we can go stand-up paddleboarding with dolphins and porpoises, or even helicopter kayaking. It exists. We do it. This is a spot where, in fact, we land our helicopters during a day of heli fishing, and we set up a picnic here. My wife and I are celebrating our 25th anniversary here on August 27th, just because we've been there with the kids, and she doesn't even know it yet, but this is where we're going to be to celebrate our anniversary. So as you can see, there's a lot of beauty up there, and it's just one of my favorite things to do. So almost done. We're going to move up to the Yukon Territory. The Yukon is enormous. It's the size of like 4 European countries put together, and only 36,000 people live in that entire area, 28,000 of them in the city of Whitehorse. So imagine an area the size of France that outside of the main little town, excuse me, you've only got about 8,000 people living in it. There's more moose and bears than there are people. Here we do Northern Lights viewing, similar to Alaska. I use a collection of small lodges. Frankly, these are quite rustic. This is pretty much the most rustic thing we do. 4-night trip. And again, similar to Alaska, you see the lights at night, and during the day, we're out dog sledding, sleeping in because you're up late, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, and ice fishing. And again, I look at this as a 4-night trip. On the first night, we'll send out our photographer, who's a guide also, to meet with our guests, show them how to use a camera, and we take pictures like this quite easily. Once you've had that first lesson, you're good for the 4 days. And I'm going to finish up with the Arctic. So, you know, if you were to ask me, what are you most excited about? I would probably say the Arctic. This is a program where you would land in Yellowknife, which is in the Northwest Territories. And then you get onto a small plane, usually a Dash 8, and you fly 3.5 hours north. This is literally an inch below the North Pole on the map. And this is where we land. This lodge has 16 yurts. It's run by one of the most, excuse me, wonderful families that I work with, the most authentic people, genuine, and they love the Arctic, and they love hosting guests up there. This is 500 miles above the Arctic Circle, and as you can see, it's quite lunar. It's physically impossible to see other people here. And if you see that water right in front of the lodge, this is what's happening in July and August. And you can see the guests standing on the shoreline, and I've been lucky enough to stand there myself. There's anywhere from 800 to 2,000 beluga whales parked right in front of that lodge, 24 hours a day throughout July and August. And it's light at night. You can even, with a guide, go down there for a walk at 2 in the morning. They're still there frolicking and essentially molting. They're exfoliating their skin. The BBC did a series called The Frozen Planet, which you might have seen. They filmed here because this is the only place on Earth. It's called the Cunningham Inlet. It's the only place on Earth where this happens. On the tundra, we go looking for muskox, and they're quite easy to find. You can go fishing, polar bear viewing, and they roam quite freely up there. We can even arrange snorkeling with narwhal. If you never knew that was possible, it's possible here. It needs a seaplane. And throughout the Arctic, our adventures are handcrafted. You can go river kayaking on an easy float like this, stand-up paddleboarding in different canyons, but really, you know, touring around on an all-terrain vehicle is what you do. And you don't have to ride it yourself. You can be a rider, or the driver rather, or you can ride on the back of someone's, or even take this extended all-terrain vehicle limousine, which is driven by a guide at like a mile an hour. You can't possibly take any risk on being in this vehicle, but it's all about getting out into the Arctic. It is untouched. It's one of the last places on Earth. And frankly, we make it accessible as long as you're fit enough to go. And you just need to, again, that's a separate conversation, but reasonably fit. This makes the Arctic accessible. And really, it is quite a magical land. And so that concludes my little webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining me. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions, anything that I can do.
Awesome, Mark, thank you. That was quite possibly the most comprehensive expert view of a destination I've ever been a part of. And I mean that with all compliment. It was very in-depth. And if you don't want to go to Canada or Alaska after seeing this, you don't have a pulse at this point. There had to be some wildlife. I mean, come on, a musk ox or a narwhal. I don't even know if I believe that narwhals actually existed, but clearly they do. So excited about that. I thought I would just maybe, I haven't seen any questions come in the queue here from any of our listeners, but I did want to point out, as I was watching and thinking through, like, what would be the next step for one of the clients here or the prospects. So clearly they need to contact one of the Bon Voyage Travel advisors and say, I just watched the Entrée Alaska presentation with Mark. Here's a couple of the things that got me excited. And I'm sure there's a number of those things. Based on that, everything I heard from you is, I know there's customization as much or as little as they want. And you do have some pre-packaged options, right? So to get people started, maybe walk people through that thought.
Yeah, I mean, you know, ultimately, we have pre-packaged options, but quite frankly, I think like 1972 was the last time someone actually bought one. We can abandon it entirely. We thrive on, frankly, we want to know what's on your list. It's that simple. And the people that, you know, are my colleagues in this company are just passionate about hearing what you want to do. And quite frankly, I think that the last 56 minutes, I said fasten your seatbelt, was probably a lot of, you know, overwhelming, let's say. And frankly, all you need to do is just to be able to call your Bon Voyage consultant and say, look, I want to see a bear. I mean, I saw a lot there. It was great. I just know I want to see a bear. I want to stand on a glacier. You know, I like puppies, so like dog sledding is cool. You don't need to know more than that to get on the phone. And by the way, we're happy to do conference calls with your advisor and you. So, you know, we're all transparent, and frankly, we're on the same team. And just don't be shy to take our time. We love it, and we, as you could tell, we're passionate about sharing it. And you know, you don't even need to remember much about this presentation.
Exactly, it inspired you. And I know that based on that question, I'll just maybe expound a little bit further. Maybe some other people have some ideas or some thoughts here. Canada and Alaska, essentially, there are parts of those two destinations that are year-round, right? So there are some great things to go in the deep of winter or obviously summer. So it's not just a summer destination. That's a fair statement.
Although I would say that the only thing to do in Alaska in the winter is Northern Lights. It's just too harsh otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. It's year round, and, you know, count on us to let you know, based on your wish list, what is the best way to experience that and the best season. And quite frankly, with the warm weather that we've been seeing in recent summers, it behooves a conversation, because while the bears might have been in one place 2 years ago in August, right now they might be in a different place, and that's part of where a conversation will help. Now, Ryan, I just want to mention one other thing that I should have mentioned right up top. Canada, the border is still closed
Right.
regarding COVID. It's technically closed until, I think they just changed it yesterday. It was June 21st. Now I believe it's July 25th. And on July 15th, our government will announce whether or not there's an extension or you're welcome to visit. Alaska opened up on June 5th, so it is absolutely open for business. We've got our first guests arrived on June 9th.
Wonderful.
So happy to say that. But you have to show that you've done a test within either 3 days or 5 days. And we can share with you where the local testing sites are based on where you live. Just ask your advisor. And you just have to show up showing a negative test result for COVID. And if it was done 5 days prior, they're going to ask you to test at the airport again. And apparently they've got that down to a pretty quick test. And then you go on to your destination, and, you know, you're at a lodge. So they're saying to generally quarantine and maintain some distance, but ultimately you can go on your vacation. If you don't get that test, you can do it at the airport as well, but we recommend getting it done. Either way, Alaska's open, and I think that this could be an amazing time, because I understand that one of the specialties of Bon Voyage Travel is cruising, but quite frankly, most of the cruise lines, or many of them, have canceled some of their departures. This is a time to go and see Alaska without crowds. So, not to say that as a salesman, but better be the only guy watching that bear than that guy with a group of people. And so I think that there's opportunity there.
You've definitely nailed it. I'll end on the last question. We did have one of our viewers ask, and I think your answer will be, it depends. But the varied experiences that you presented, price range, kind of depends, right? So I would assume that you can meet the needs of the traveler wherever they're at. There's experiences you could craft that are more on a budget style, on a cruise post or a cruise shore excursion or something, but it could also be a 7-10 day experience at a luxury property that might skew a little higher on somebody's budget, but you could essentially meet the customer where they're at.
Well, it depends.
Within reason,
right?
Right?
I'll answer that question. So, I mean, I don't care if a booking is small or big, okay? What I care about is that we're bringing value to the booking. And I will say, especially with Canada being as big as it is, we don't particularly have expertise in what I would consider to be 3-star hotels or 3-star lodges. We generally skew up to 4- and 5-star properties and products. And frankly, I still welcome your phone call. If we can't help you get what you're looking for, we'll tell you where to find it. So don't be shy. Like I said, we only want to bring value where we operate. And if we can't, we'll tell you, and we'll be honest. Now, Alaska, we do whale watching excursion in Juneau for $129. So again, I couldn't care less if you are spending a lot of money or a little money. I care that our vendors and our suppliers are going to be the right fit for what you're looking for. That's more important to us. And again, if we don't have what you're looking for, we're happy to tell you. But yeah, rarely, Ryan, do we feel that we can't meet the needs of a guest. I will say one final thing though. 3-star in Alaska, in a lodge, I caution our guests against, because even the 5-star lodges physically sometimes look like 3-star properties. So I don't want you to cut so many corners that you feel like your safety is being at risk, or that you're in a place that is just not to your standards. So if we're not selling it, there's a good reason why.
Excellent.
usually.
Great. That's great feedback. Mark, thank you for a fantastic walk through Alaska and Canada. We appreciate your time. Just want to remind all of our viewers that the webinar series continues every Wednesday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, right here. If you want more information about the future webinars, go to our website, bvtravel.com. In fact, 1 week from today, we will continue our discussion essentially of domestic travel. We're going to be looking more at the United States, some wonderful luxury resorts that maybe you've never heard of that would be easy to get to and open to your travel in the very near future. So sign up for that webinar right now. Go to bvtravel.com. Thank you for your time. And Mark, once again, let's get some people to Alaska and Canada. What do you say?
Thank you for spending an hour with me. It's my privilege. So thanks for inviting me as well, Ryan.
Thanks, Mark. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.